Government surveillance. A touchy subject for most people. Something that is very frowned upon, but it's something that happens from day-to-day life. We are all watched by the government. It is very similar to Big Brother. Maybe not quite the level yet, but we do have some countries that think that that should be the way. Some countries, like North Korea, find comfort in creating a more totalitarian government. The more and more I read about it, the more and more I decided it sounded much like 1984. North Korea surveys its citizens constantly in order to make sure that there aren't any defectors, in order to keep the country unified, with air quotes. And speaking of 1984, the really weird thing about North Korea is every household has to have a mandatory radio set with a microphone in it. It's tapped up to the government, and it's almost exactly like the telescreens in 1984. Always watching. I guess Big Brother should have been depicted as Kim Jong-un in 1984. But let's get into the meat of this. Why do governments like to survey? It's something that a lot of people don't understand because everybody likes their privacy. But even the US does this with the Constitution and free speech and the Fourth Amendment, the right to privacy. We are constantly being watched by the US government. And nothing was brought more to light than when I had a speaker in my aerospace class the other day come to class and actually tell us that when he was younger, before technology was ridiculously crazy as it is today, he ended up going to a hypnotist show and he put on an act and stuff, faked it all. When he went to go join a secret operations group for the B-2 bomber, they asked him if he had gone to a hypnotist show within the past decade, and he had to answer yes to that. He figured that they knew. They knew that he ended up going to that show, and it's kind of ridiculous that the U.S. government keeps such tabs on us, even though the Constitution specifically tries to prevent that, and I guess a piece of paper can't hold anyone back. Overall, I think the biggest thing for country surveillance is often played off as an excuse, just like the Patriot Act and stuff. The Patriot Act had actually said that it was going to implement extra surveillance options to stop terrorism, but to this day, more terrorist attacks have been done by white people than Muslims, and people's devices are still searched just to see, based off of racial profiling, if they think that they're a high-risk group, i.e. people of color usually. But of course, these aren't just for surveillance to protect us. The government's natural state are to gain more power over the people. It's just how it works. No government likes to be weak. They only like to grow stronger. These surveillance tactics are simply ways to basically just keep tabs on people, and it's a way to have a government basically just flex its power. To be able to know is to be able to control. Like in 1984, the power to govern is mainly based off of the power to say that 2 + 2 = 5. And boy, do governments like to do that. Again, going back to our North Korea example, North Korea is very infamous for being very totalitarian, very communistic, watching over their people. Like I said, they survey with a mandatory government-issued radio that's got a wiretap to it. But just like in 1984, North Korea controls everything that goes out to the public. There is anti-Western propaganda everywhere. Like, it's not just... And citizens begin to believe what's constantly told to them because there's nothing else that they can base their knowledge off of. It's kind of hard to imagine, but if you're told that, from North Korea's perspective, if you're told from the instant that you're born that Americans are slaughterers, and even sometimes in writings were referred to as cannibals, you start to believe it because there's nothing else to tell you otherwise. The only thing that could probably get you to start questioning your government at that point is if the government intentionally puts you through hardship and suffering. Kind of like Winston in 1984. He was constantly going through these hard times of just being one of the poorer people, and it caused him to defect. And, well, for the people who've read 1984, it didn't turn out very well, but I guess sort of did in the end. It's all about a government's control over the people, and governments like power. I mean, I guess everybody likes power. When it all comes down to it, it's just power. Like, there's no other reason. One thing that I do find very odd is that the American government continues to follow these practices of, you could maybe argue that it's to the level of North Korea, even though it's not to its maximum level. It's just that they have the technology that right now the NSA could be listening to me. They could be listening to you. They could be watching you while watching this video. It's something that's just very touchy. And there's a statistic that 74% of Americans say that they should not give up privacy in order to be protected from terrorism. And I think that is very true, at least for me. It's kind of that thing of like, terrorists will be terrorists. You can't stop a terrorist attack, really. And it all kind of comes down to that thing of just, it's an excuse. To me, it's all an excuse in order to gain more power over the public. The want to control people is deep within like humans' blood. That's something that we like to do. We like to flex our power. We like to make sure that people know that we're powerful, and that just gets reflected in governments times 10, because then you have a whole ton of people with similar ideas that just collect together to make a hive mind of power-hungry people. And it's not just me saying this. Like, there's a statistic to back it up. Fully 87% of Americans are aware that the federal government has surveillance programs, and among of those aware, 25% of the adults have changed the way that they use technology because of that. And additionally, 61% of those aware of the programs say that they have become less confident that the programs are serving the public interest. It's kind of showing a trend here that just because the government can survey, other people are kind of catching on that it's not necessarily for the benefit of the public. It's more for the government, because why not? I get other countries' motives, such as Korea, like their totalitarian government. They don't care about their people as much as they basically do about just being a country. Their whole entire motive is to be a unified hive mind, basically. Teach everybody the same thing and make sure that nobody defects. But the biggest issue with government surveillance that we see is in so-called free countries. And yes, countries like the US and stuff, we are free, but we're always a slave to being watched. I mean, the majority of Americans say they wish they were able to precisely control who is monitoring them and who they can send their information to, or who can get their information. But the issue is that government surveillance is very shaky among most of the population, and yet the US continues to increase its surveillance. I don't know if it's as bad as other countries, but it definitely is an issue. It's got a lot of people worried because, yes, it is only a few people that are getting their hands on the information, because it's usually just generally the NSA or the FBI, but it's for no good reason as far as I'm concerned, or almost anyone else is concerned, because they're not stopping threats. Terrorist attacks haven't gone down since the Patriot Act, since many other acts that have claimed to increase security in order to protect us. There are no benefits. There are no benefits to surveillance other than keeping tabs on people. And that's the biggest issue with everything that the federal government does, is it really just kind of degrades definitely a lot of people's aspect of how they would call this country great, because you're always watched. I guess only hope that the people of America have, at least, is the fact that this is a country ran by the people. A lot of people seem to forget that, and even the government seems to forget that. Like, the government acts very much as though it's not attached to the people at all, but at the base it is. The Constitution was written for the people. That's the first phrase. For the people. It's this whole entire country was built about around the idea of not having a government that is so overbearing that you can't look over your shoulder without seeing a spy. And I guess in this case, I can't even look into any camera around me. You know, like even the director of the FBI has a sticky note on his computer's camera. You know how mind-blowing that is? Not even the director of the FBI is confident with his ability to be secure in the information about him that is passed around. It goes to show that it's almost rampant, and I believe that if the government starts to survey even more, or if they start to use the information for bad things, such as North Korea basically putting people into prison camps, I think that we'll see a big revolt, and I think that it is very wrong for the amount of surveillance to go on. Now, I'm not saying that the government should walk around blindfolded, but it's something that you shouldn't have to put a sticky note over your computer camera because you think that somebody is going to watch you. That's not right. It's something that needs to be stopped, and it's something that should definitely be talked out against, and it's never talked out against because who's going to go against the government? Unless you're the whole population of the US, but it's kind of hard to rally 300 million people. With that, I leave you.